So tonight's theme, as you guys may have gleaned, is love and heartbreak in and around Arizona. And so tonight, I'd like to tell you a story about a way that I decided to work through my personal emotional issues on the Arizona Republic's dime. Because it's cheap. So one Valentine's Day a couple of years ago, I went to my boss and I was like, I would like to go to the self-help section of the bookstore and look up all the things that the dating books say that you should do to get a man to marry you. And then I want to try it out here in Phoenix, Arizona. And my bosses were kind of like, oh, sure. Which was kind of weird of them actually at the time. But I said, you know what I'm going to do to really double down and make sure it's an awesome story? I'm going to call all the authors of the books. And I'm going to call dating coaches. I'm going to ask them like specifically what is the what of the thing that you were telling me to do. Because it's easy to write a book and be like, hey, men marry bitches, which I saw at the airport the other day. But it's a whole other thing to like sit on the phone with me and be like, I promise you this will work. Which is what I essentially asked them to do. So the first thing I did was I called this amazing woman who I was in love with since I was a kid. She is the advice columnist at Elle, and her name is E. Jean Carroll, and she's a piece of work. And I had been reading her column since I was like 16, so I was prepped. I was like, yes, E. Jean will not steer me wrong, because since I was 16 years old, I've thought E. Jean will help me get married. I'm a weird 16-year-old. I read a lot of magazines. So E. Jean says, when you go out, you should wear like, oh, there I am. Am I starting over? No, you heard me. I'm loud. Point of the story, we're there. We're in the middle of the story. E. Jean Carroll says, wear swishy flowing skirts because men are attracted to things that move and color. They're like snakes. I was like, wow, I totally want to marry one. So the first thing I do is I go to, also my bosses tell me, hey Megan, people don't really just meet in bars, right? Like our readers are like regular people, and they meet at places like Starbucks, and they meet at the grocery store, and they meet wherever. And I was like, I've been to Starbucks and I've never seen George Clooney. But I agreed to I agreed to some stuff for this story, right? Because they also were paying for everything that I spent on this story. So I go to AJ's at Lincoln and Scottsdale Road because I think AJ's at Lincoln and Scottsdale is gonna be like some nice dudes, right? They're gonna like some money and they're gonna dress nice. And so I'm all like in my high heels and I'm in my fancy skirt. And I'm like walking around, and her advice was to also flirt non-verbally with eye contact and smiling, which I've been doing a lot with you audience, but I don't feel like it's working any better. So I started walking around and I realized really quickly that the only dudes shopping at AJ's at 6:30 on a Tuesday are men whose wives have sent them out to get something incredibly specific for dinner. Because you know when like straight dudes my age go grocery shopping around 11:30 at night at the Safeway in their neighborhood, and they're not shopping for like swanky nice stuff at AJ's, right? They're like shopping for hungry man dinners or like chips and salsa that they will just eat in one sitting, and that will be dinner. And so I'm like making eye contact, and like everyone I'm looking at, and I'm old enough now at this point, I'm probably 26 at the time, so I do look for the ring, right? Because you all know that you reach that moment where you start looking for the ring. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a Jezebel, because I am making eye contact with married men, like left and right, and it's awkward. But then I'm like, I gotta bring this home, so what am I gonna put in my cart? Scone mix? I swear to God, that's true. I put scone mix in my cart, which I've never made. Like, come on, like, do I look like a baker? No, I look like a lady who orders a cocktail when she goes out, and maybe or maybe does not have dessert. So obviously AJ's a total botch. So I say, okay, I'm gonna go to Lux, and I'm gonna try this other tip, which was to flirt physically with your body, like, which is different from non-verbally apparently. And her instruction, this woman who wrote this book, bullshit, was like, touch your hair and like touch your body in a really seductive way. I don't think so. So like, look at me, right? Like, I think I had a perm still at this point in my life. Which is true. And so I'm like, I'm gonna go to Lux, which is in Central Phoenix, and is really yes, because you love Phoenix. And also like people go there, and I think that people who meet there, I've met a guy who literally met his wife there. So this is a legitimate thing. And even if you don't talk to anybody there, people act cool at Lux, like they might have sex with each other. And I was like, I'm in, I'm gonna go to Lux. And I sit there and I read like some really sexy magazine, like I think I got Cosmo, right? Who are you kidding? And I'm all like, hello. And I'm all like, I don't know, rubbing my arm. And I walk to the bathroom in this way that like I have never walked in my life. I have several friends in the audience, they can attest, I trip in my real life. And instead I just ended up looking like I had like lice and scabies, and like I was kind of weird, and I touched myself a lot. And I was like, I gotta get out of here. So I was there for about an hour, and I was like, cut, bait. No, while all this is going on, my boss is like, you need to have a control group, so you need to join eHarmony, because at the time, that was even before like Match.com like blew up. And so I spent like $75 of the Arizona Republic's money to join it for 1 month, and it took me 2.5 hours on work time to fill out the personality profile. This is true, like I'm not making that up, right? So I go on these dates, and they're kind of terrible, but I went on one date with this guy, and he was really nice, and he's an engineer at Honeywell, and he was like tall, and he was into indie rock, and like I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with you, but like it was a good date. And the reason why it was a good date was because on the first date, we're having a drink, and he looks at me and says, listen, I don't care what I look like in your story, but you are pretty, and I don't care how this ends, but I am not leaving this date. And I was like, okay, we're in. Okay, you're in. I like you a lot. And at the end of the date, he like leaned in for a kiss that I don't usually give on first dates, and I was really impressed. I was like, ladies and gentlemen, eHarmony. While this is going on, I still need to do more stuff, right, for my story. So I go to Stingray, and Stingray is a like fancy sushi restaurant in Scottsdale. At the time, that was the only location. And I need to send a guy a drink is somebody's tip. And that's kind of like a bold move, but I'm like, all right. So I find a cute guy at the bar, and I send him a drink, and you're supposed to write something on the napkin, and I realize I have picked approximately the only bar in the city of Phoenix that has black napkins. I'm like, oh my God! And I don't scrapbook, right? So I don't have in my purse like those gel pens that are like iridescent, and you could write something on a black mark. So then I gotta ask, like, this is true. I have to ask the waitress, like, for a white napkin, which she doesn't have, so she tears off something from like the receipt. So I'm sending a dude with like a drink and a receipt with something written on it, which I just think at that point, you know, you're totally not going home with him. And I write, as though to seal the deal, you're such a cutie, Megan. Just let that wash over you, because you probably last heard it from your aunt at like a family picnic, because no one talks that way. But like I do, right? Because I don't know what to say, because I don't want to go out with him. But I'm doing this. So in the meantime, I go on more dates with this guy from eHarmony, and by more I mean like one. But it's going well, and I have to write my story. And so I file my story, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I get this phone call, and this is true. I get this phone call on my cell, and it's the guy from eHarmony, and he's calling, and he's saying, hey, Megan, how are you? And I was like, I'm good. And I'm thinking, this dude with like a good job and a dog and likes good music and like, you know, tall and whatever, like, okay, he's calling me and we're gonna have another date. And he goes, I don't see this working out. And I was like, I just finished my story. I just filed it. Like, filed it is when you turn it in. And I had a happy ending. I had a Valentine's Day story that said, try this crap in books, you'll get a date. And I sat at my desk and I was like, okay. And like, you don't want to ask why, right? You just want to get off the phone. Because like, you don't know him that well. And I was just like, okay, take it like a champ. Get off the phone. And I sit at my desk and I'm like, I start to cry because I'm like a really emotional person, like shock. And then there's no one left in the newsroom except Stacy, who's in the front row. And it was very late. It was later at night, and so I'm crying at my desk, filing a Valentine's Day story. Like, Jesus. And I have to write an ending, and I write this devastating ending, and I'm like, hey, it doesn't work. And then my boss, like, the next day, my boss, like, I go home, and I'm like, all feeling sorry for myself. And my boss reads the story, and she's like, listen, the Arizona Republic is not actually a place for you to exercise your personal demons. You need to give people a real ending, because that is just miserable. And I was like, oh, and that's the first time I learned in journalism, you got to take care of your reader, not just your own psychosis. So look for that. So I put a new ending on it that is actually much more true to who I was bitter, right? Like, I put a sad ending. And this is much more true to like what I've learned in life, and certainly since then. And that is, if you want a date on Valentine's Day, you should just ask a man to take you out on Valentine's Day, or possibly any other day. Because all that stuff in the books, I think, makes you look like a Jezebel, like you have scabies, or like you're your aunt at a family picnic. You don't have to. It's awkward because I don't get off the stage, right? Because I have to introduce the next person. So you can just keep clapping and it would be incredible.